Hey friends, this is Jonathan Chavez. My first experience with community was when I first became a pastor. Right after graduation, I went back to my home country, Lima, in Peru, and I began pastoring a 15 member church in one of the poorest areas of my country. The people there were renting a piece of property. They didn't have any building. They just had a property with bamboo mats and a very rural roof. And they were behind like $800. I, by the grace of God, called a few friends here in America. They helped us with almost 500. I told these 15 people that we needed to start cooking food and selling food. We did. We were able to pay the money the church was behind. In fact, the church only had $100 in the church account, and the former pastor did not have a salary from the church because he had a second job. So I was in a very hard situation. I told them that God was going to bless the church, that the church was going to grow, but they had to learn to give tithes and offerings to the church. Well, by the grace of God, in about 9 months, we had 100 people. The church had grown to 100 people. And I traveled to the U.S. twice. I preached in a few friends' churches, especially American churches, and they blessed our church with almost $25,000. The piece of land there in Peru where I was pastoring costed $20,000, and we had about $5,000 left to start building the sanctuary. So when I came to the end of that year, 2003, I talked to the lawyer of the denomination to tell him that we wanted to buy the land because in my country everything worked with lawyers and notaries. So he went and found out, from the uh, papers of this land that there were four owners in this land, and one of them had already passed away. And he suggested that we should buy another land that this was too high of a risk. So I called the leadership, which most of them were part of those 15 people I found when I got to the church. I told them that the lawyer had suggested we should buy somewhere else. And well, they seemed to understand. They said, Pastor, but God had spoken us that this was going to be the house of the Lord and we should stay here. We should buy the place anyway, regardless of the situation with the papers. Well, I said I wasn't going to put that money to risk because that money was sent as an offering from our churches, from our denomination here in the U.S. Well, what they did, they started calling the new people that had gotten to church and started telling them lies that I didn't want to purchase the land, that I wanted to keep the money for myself, or maybe that I never had the money to begin with. And when I found out this was such a high impact, and I saw some people leaving the church that one night I woke up and I was so thirsty. I drank a whole jar of lemonade, and I was still thirsty and thirsty. By the end of that week, I went to the doctor. I found out I had diabetes. He asked me if my parents were diabetic, my grandparents were diabetic. I said, no, no, no one in my family has diabetes. He asked me, what do you do? I said, I'm a pastor. He says, that's your issue. Pastors are too stressed out. And you had at least that's what he said, an emotional reaction to whatever you're facing in church, and that produced diabetes. So there's no cure for diabetes. And that was maybe my most painful experience in the community, being betrayed by the leadership, the church splitting. And at the end, I decided to move with my wife to another church, to plant a church. I became a church planter because I had the money to purchase a land and I had the money to build. So I took that money and we planted a church for the denomination in another place. One of the maybe the most joyous experiences I've had in community was when we moved from my country in 2011 from Peru to Mexico, my wife's country. we started a church in the garage of a house, and we had gotten to Mexico with only the money from all the stuff, our personal belongings we had sold in Peru. But when we got to Mexico, our denomination didn't want to accept us because maybe they thought that we were coming to Mexico to ask them for a church, which we never did. But we got in touch with them. We told them that we wanted to transfer from Peru to Mexico. They just uh, had us going and around, and they never did anything. So we started a church in the garage by ourselves. But money was running out. I had to pay for rent, medicine, uh, uniforms, because in Latin America, public schools have uniforms. So I had to buy uniforms. I had to pay for my medicine for diabetes, and suddenly I had almost no more money. Uh, on the fifth service in that garage, a very beautiful car, a brand new car, parks in front of the garage or the new church we were planting, and a man with a suit and his wife and three older kids went inside the church. They sat down, and while I was preaching, we only had like 12 people that Sunday because we had just started. I saw that the man that had come out of the car, he was crying and crying and crying while I was preaching. And while I was preaching, I was thinking in my mind, uh, why is he crying? When the service was over, he came forward, he introduces himself. His name was Rolando. He introduced his wife, his kids, his children. And he said, Pastor, can I have your phone number? I would like to talk to you personally, if you would allow me to. I said, yes. And I asked them, how did you find out about the church? And they said, well, my sister, and they introduced me. He introduced me his sister. She's attending this church. She got saved here with you, and we used to attend a church, 1,000 people church, about an hour and a half from here. But we live here. We live about 5 minutes from here, and we want to stay here in your church. The Lord has spoken to us, and we want to stay here with you. And I said, you're more than welcome to stay, but are you sure you're coming from a church that has everything, all the ministries? And here we are just starting. He said, Pastor, the Lord spoke to me, and I want to stay. And that's one of the reasons I need to talk to you later. Well, that was Sunday morning. By Monday, he calls me and he says, Pastor, can I go visit you with my wife to your house, your apartment, wherever you live? I gave them my address. At that time, the Lord knows I only had $100 left. I didn't know how I was going to pay the rent, how I was going to buy shoes for my kids for school. I didn't have no money. And for about 3 weeks, I had been crying every night, praying to God for a miracle, a financial miracle. That day that they come, he starts telling me that he needs prayer, that he's going on vacations with all his family to Las Vegas in the U.S. And while I was listening to him talking about Las Vegas and traveling and money, in my heart and my mind, I was somewhere else. I was thinking about my need and my family. And he said, Pastor, can you pray for us? Can you bless us so that we can travel? So I prayed for them. I didn't even have faith anymore to pray, but I just prayed for them. I blessed them. And before they left, he pulls out an envelope from his jacket and he says, Pastor, this is for you. Don't be stressed out anymore. This is something the Lord told us that we should give you. So they left. I went back to praying and crying, asking God for provision. And suddenly my wife tells me, hey, what did Brother Rolando give you? And I had totally forgotten. I went to the room where she was at. I opened the envelope, and I had seen in Mexico 100 pesos, the bills. 500 pesos was the most I had seen, 20, 50. But I had never seen 1,000 pesos bills. Suddenly 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. That was like 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 pesos, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 pesos, Mexican pesos. And my wife and I started to cry, and I felt God speaking to my heart. And He said, I told you I was going to bless you in Mexico. Don't be concerned anymore. I called this brother next day to thank them, and I said, are you sure you wanted to give me all this money? And he said, Pastor, there are three big political parties here in Mexico. One is called the PRD. I am the national accountant for the PRD. That's the reason I have visa to travel to Mexico with all my family. I got apartments in Mexico. I got houses. It's just that I don't try to show them to people because of all the kidnapping that goes on here in Mexico, and I live in this area. But I got plenty of money, and I just want you to know that I'm here to bless you. That's what the Lord wants me to do while I'm in your church. I will sustain your ministry. So as I was praying to the Lord, I said, Lord, this is not my country. This is not my people. How do you bless a Peruvian in Mexico from people that don't even know me? And I just knew that moment in community that God can do anything He wants using anyone He wants. So those are my experiences in community. And I learned that sometimes people will behave not Christ-like, like what happened to me in Peru. Not everyone was like that, not at all. But those people that I found acted really, really bad, and I didn't know how to manage that situation, and I ended up getting sick. So I don't blame them. I blame myself for not being able. I blamed because I don't blame myself anymore. But at that moment, I blamed myself because I never knew how to handle this situation. But now I went to Mexico, and I was blessed in a major way in Mexico, in a country that was not mine. So community, you can have the good community and the bad community, but at the end, Jesus Christ is still the Lord of community. God bless you.